Salt water burned my lungs as I clawed toward the surface. The yacht's lights were already fading into darkness above me. My brother's face was the last thing I saw before I went under. His jaw tight. His eyes empty of everything except cold calculation. "You should have stayed out of it, Harper," he'd said, his voice flat and final. Then his hands hit my shoulders and I was falling. The splash swallowed my scream. The ocean wrapped around me like a freezing fist, dragging me down into blackness. My head spun. I tasted blood in my mouth where I'd bitten my tongue. The yacht's engines roared to life somewhere above, the sound muffled and distant. He was leaving. Elias was actually leaving me here to die. My own brother. The waves pushed me under again, and panic exploded in my chest. I kicked hard, breaking the surface just long enough to gulp air before another wave crashed over me. The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction. No lights, no land, just black water and blacker sky. My limbs felt heavy, like someone had tied weights to my wrists and ankles. Every breath was a fight. I tried to scream for help, but my voice came out as a weak croak that disappeared into the wind. How far offshore were we? 2 miles. 3. I couldn't remember. My designer dress clung to me like seaweed, dragging me down. I kicked off my heels and watched them sink into the darkness below. The water was so cold it made my bones ache. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. I couldn't tell anymore. My thoughts started to drift. I remembered Dad's funeral 6 months ago. I remembered Elias standing beside me at the grave, squeezing my hand. "We're all each other has now," he'd whispered. I'd believed him. What an idiot I'd been. Images flashed through my foggy brain. Dad's will. The lawyer reading it in that oak-paneled office. $3 billion split between me and Elias, but only if we ran Quinn Industries together. If one of us died, the survivor got everything. I remembered the look on Elias's face when he heard that clause, a flash of something dark that disappeared so fast I thought I'd imagined it. But I hadn't imagined it. He'd been planning this even then, probably. While I'd been grieving our father, Elias had been doing math. 3 billion divided by 2 was 1.5 billion each. 3 billion divided by 1 was everything. My arms were too tired to swim anymore. I let myself float on my back, staring up at the stars. They looked cold and far away, like they were watching me die and didn't care. The ocean rocked me gently, almost peaceful now. My eyes started to close. Something rough scraped against my arm. I jerked awake, thrashing, thinking shark. But it wasn't a shark, it was wood. A piece of debris, maybe from a boat, floating beside me. I grabbed it with both hands and held on like it was the only solid thing left in the world. The wood kept me afloat, my cheek pressed against its rough surface. I don't know how long I drifted like that. Time stopped meaning anything. The sky started to lighten from black to gray. Dawn was coming. I was still alive. Then I heard it, an engine. Different from the yacht, rougher and older. I lifted my head and saw a small fishing boat cutting through the morning mist. "Help!" I tried to yell, but my voice was gone. I waved one arm weakly. The boat kept coming. Someone had seen me. The engine cut, and a weathered face appeared over the side. "Holy hell," the fisherman said. "How long you been out here?" I woke up on the deck of the fishing boat, wrapped in scratchy blankets that smelled like fish and diesel fuel. My throat burned. My head pounded. Every muscle in my body screamed. The fisherman crouched beside me, holding out a bottle of water. "Easy now," he said. "Small sips." His name was Thomas, he told me. He'd been heading back to port after a night fishing trip when he spotted me. "You're lucky," he said. "Another hour and the current would have taken you past the shipping lanes. Nobody would have found you then." I tried to speak, but my voice came out as a raspy whisper. "My brother," I managed. He pushed me. Thomas's eyes narrowed. "Someone did this to you on purpose." He nodded. The reality of it hit me all over again and I started shaking. Not from cold this time, from rage. Elias had tried to murder me. He'd looked me in the eyes and shoved me into the ocean to drown. Thomas wanted to take me straight to the hospital, but I begged him not to. Please, I rasped. Not yet. If he finds out I'm alive. I didn't finish the sentence. Thomas studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I got a cabin inland. You can stay there while you figure things out. But you need a doctor. He called a friend who made house calls, no questions asked. By the time we reached Thomas's cabin 3 hours later, my mind was clearing. The doctor checked me over. Minor hypothermia, bruised ribs, dehydration, but nothing that wouldn't heal. You're tougher than you look, she said. After she left, I borrowed Thomas's phone and searched my own name. The results made my stomach drop. Harper Quinn, 32, missing at sea. The article was already up, posted just 2 hours ago. Elias had reported me missing. He'd called the Coast Guard, played the panicked brother perfectly. There was even a quote from him. We were having dinner on the yacht when she went to the deck for air. When I went to check on her, she was gone. I read every article I could find. The story Elias told was flawless. We'd been celebrating a new business deal. Had too much wine. He'd stepped inside to take a phone call, and when he came back out, I'd vanished. He suggested I must have lost my balance and fallen overboard. The Coast Guard was searching, but hopes were fading. In one photo, Elias stood on the dock looking devastated, his hand covering his face. The performance was perfect. He even cried for the cameras. I stared at that photo until my hands shook. This wasn't a sudden decision. He'd planned every detail. The remote location, timing, the cover story. He'd probably been planning it for months, ever since Dad's will was read. Thomas brought me soup and sat across from me at the small kitchen table. So what are you going to do? He asked quietly. I met his eyes. I'm going to let him think I'm dead. And then I'm going to destroy him. My name was Harper Quinn. I was 32 years old. I'd spent the last 8 years helping build my father's company into a $3 billion empire. While Elias had been the public face, charming investors, giving interviews, attending galas, I'd been the one actually running things. I handled the numbers, negotiated the contracts, made the hard decisions. Dad knew it. That's why his will required both of us to manage Quinn Industries together. He didn't trust Elias alone with the company. He'd been right not to. For the next few days, I stayed hidden in Thomas's cabin and watched the news coverage. Day 3, my memorial service. Elias wore black and gave a tearful speech about what an amazing sister I'd been. Harper was brilliant and kind, he said, his voice breaking. She gave everything to our family's company. Her loss is unbearable. I watched him wipe away tears that looked completely real. The bastard should have been an actor. Day 5. The search was officially called off. Harper Quinn was presumed dead. The funeral was scheduled for the following week. I watched Elias hug my friends, accept condolences, play the grieving brother flawlessly. Nobody suspected a thing. Why would they? Elias was charming and successful. I was the quiet one, the serious one, the one who stayed in the background. Nobody would believe golden boy Elias could murder his own sister. But I had one advantage he didn't know about. I'd built Quinn Industries from the ground up. I knew every account, every password, every offshore holding. I knew where the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. Dad hadn't always done business cleanly, and I'd helped cover some of those tracks. Elias knew the company existed, but he didn't know how it actually worked. He was about to learn that looking successful and being successful were very different things. 1 week after he killed me, Elias inherited everything. The will was processed quickly. Too quickly, which made me suspicious. I used Thomas's computer to dig into the legal filings. That's when I found it. The death certificate. It had been filed the day after I disappeared, signed by a medical examiner declaring me dead despite no body being recovered. That wasn't standard procedure. Someone had rushed it through. Someone with money and connections. I screenshot everything and saved it to an encrypted file. Then I started going through Quinn Industries' financial records. Elias had wasted no time. In just 1 week, He'd already moved $200 million into personal accounts. He was looting the company like a pirate ransacking a ship. I watched the numbers change in real time, my anger growing colder and sharper. He wasn't just a murderer. He was a thief. And he was sloppy about it, leaving a digital trail a first-year accounting student could follow. I cut my hair short and dyed it dark brown. My naturally blonde hair had been shoulder length. Now it barely touched my ears. I bought cheap clothes from a thrift store. Jeans and plain shirts, nothing like the designer outfits Harper Quinn wore. With glasses and minimal makeup, I looked completely different. Thomas barely recognized me when I walked back into the cabin. "If I didn't know better," he said, shaking his head, "I'd walk right past you on the street." Perfect. That's exactly what I needed. I opened a new bank account under a fake name, using documents a friend of Thomas's provided. No questions asked. Then I reached out to the one person I knew I could trust. Marcus had been Dad's accountant for 20 years. He'd retired 6 months before Dad died, but we'd stayed in touch. I sent him an encrypted email from an anonymous account. "Marcus, it's Harper. I'm alive. I need your help. Don't tell anyone." Marcus called the burner phone I'd bought within an hour. "Harper." His voice shook. "Everyone thinks you're dead. What happened?" I told him everything. Yeah. Push. Waking up in the ocean. Elias's perfect lies. When I finished, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I always knew that boy was rotten," he finally said. "Your father knew it too. That's why he wrote the will that way." We talked for 2 hours. Marcus still had access to some of Quinn Industries' financial systems. Access Elias didn't know about because it was buried in old corporate structures. "I can see what he's doing," Marcus said grimly. "He's moving money into shell companies in the Cayman Islands. He's setting up to disappear the assets before anyone notices." I smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Then let's make sure everyone notices. Can you document everything he's doing?" Marcus's reply was immediate. "Already started." For the next 3 months, I lived like a ghost. I stayed in Thomas's cabin, rarely going outside except at night. I watched Quinn Industries from afar as Elias ran it into the ground. Stock prices dropped. Major clients started leaving. The board of directors held emergency meetings. Elias blamed the instability on my death, on transitional challenges, on market conditions, anything but his own incompetence. Meanwhile, Marcus and I built our case. Every illegal transfer, every falsified document, every shady deal. We documented all of it, creating a file so airtight that not even Elias's expensive lawyers could wiggle free. But I didn't release it yet. I wanted him comfortable first. Confident. I wanted him to believe he'd actually gotten away with murder. One night, I watched an interview he gave to a business magazine. The interviewer asked if he ever felt overwhelmed running the company alone. Elias's smile was smooth as oil. "Harper taught me everything I know," he said. "I'm honoring her memory by continuing the work we started together." That interview aired in December, 6 months after he'd killed me. By then, Elias had moved into a massive mansion in the hills, 20,000 square feet, with an infinity pool and a view of the ocean. The same ocean he'd thrown me into. He threw parties every weekend. I saw photos on social media of him surrounded by models and celebrities, champagne flowing, everyone laughing. He looked happy, successful, untouchable. I studied those photos carefully, memorizing every face. These were his new friends, the people drawn to his money and power. They'd disappear the second that money was gone. Around this time I started noticing something strange. Elias was getting paranoid. In interviews, his eyes darted around. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. He'd hired extra security for the mansion. He jumped at shadows. But maybe some part of him knew I was still out there. Maybe he dreamed about me every night, waterlogged and furious, coming back for revenge. In January I made my first move. I sent an anonymous tip to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Nothing too detailed, Just enough to make them curious about some irregular transfers out of Quinn Industries. The SEC opened an investigation. Elias called an emergency board meeting, assuring everyone it was routine. Just bureaucratic nonsense, he told investors. Nothing to worry about. But he was worried. I could see it in how he moved, quick and jerky like a trapped animal. He started drinking more. The parties got wilder, more desperate. He fired his chief financial officer for asking too many questions about the offshore accounts. That was a mistake. The fired CFO was angry and had documents of his own. He didn't know everything. I'd been careful to keep the really damaging stuff hidden, but he knew enough to add fuel to the fire. The SEC investigation expanded. Elias hired a team of lawyers. The legal fees alone were $500,000 a month. In March, exactly 1 year after he murdered me, I decided it was time. Marcus and I had everything we needed. Every crime documented. Every lie exposed. Every dollar traced. I had video footage from the yacht security system. Footage Elias thought he'd deleted, but I'd backed up to a private server years ago. The video showed everything. Him arguing with me about the company. Me threatening to go to the board about his embezzlement. Him grabbing my shoulders. Push. My scream. Him standing at the rail watching me drown. His face completely calm. Then him going inside and waiting exactly 30 minutes before calling the Coast Guard, giving me plenty of time to die. I watched that video once and never again. I didn't need to. It was burned into my memory. Marcus and I created a detailed package. Financial crimes. Evidence of the rushed death certificate. The security footage. Witness statements from employees Elias had screwed over. We had everything. I sent copies to 3 places simultaneously. First, to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Second, to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Third, to every major news outlet in the country. Then I waited. The story broke at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday. Quinn Industries heir suspected of murdering sister for inheritance. Every news channel led with it. The video footage went viral within hours. I watched from Thomas's cabin as Elias's perfect world exploded. His phone must have been ringing non-stop. His lawyers must have been losing their minds. The board of directors held an emergency meeting and voted to suspend him pending investigation. Trading of Quinn Industries stock was halted. Federal agents showed up at his mansion by noon. I watched the live helicopter footage as they led him out in handcuffs. He looked shocked, like he couldn't believe this was happening. Like he'd really thought he'd gotten away with it. But Elias had always been slippery. 48 hours later he was released. His lawyers had gotten him out on bail. $20 million, posted by an anonymous source. He walked out of jail with his head high, surrounded by bodyguards. At a press conference on the courthouse steps, he declared his innocence. "These charges are absurd," he said, his voice strong and confident. "The evidence has been fabricated by someone with a grudge against me and my family. I loved my sister. I would never harm her." He even cried a little. Some people believed him. The rich and powerful always had defenders. I watched that press conference and felt my rage crystallize into something cold and hard as diamond. He wasn't going to charm his way out of this. Not this time. I started digging deeper. Who had posted his bail? Who was protecting him? Took me 3 days to find the answer. Warren Blackwood. A billionaire investor who'd been Dad's silent partner in several ventures. Warren had made his fortune off deals my father had brought him. Without Dad, Warren would still be managing a mid-level hedge fund somewhere. Now he was protecting the man who'd murdered his benefactor's daughter. I arranged a meeting with Warren through an intermediary. He agreed to meet at a private club in the city, probably curious about who was asking. I walked in wearing an expensive suit I'd bought for the occasion. My hair was still short and dark, but I'd styled it professionally. With the right makeup and clothes, I looked like a successful businesswoman. Just not like Harper Quinn. Warren sat at a corner table, nursing a scotch. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, with a kind of confidence that came from never hearing the word no. I sat down across from him without being invited. "Mr. Blackwood," I said quietly, "we need to talk about Elias Quinn." Warren's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were photos. Warren and my father 20 years ago, celebrating a deal. Warren and my father at a private meeting. Documents showing the illegal shortcuts they'd taken to make their fortunes. "I'm someone who knows where all the bodies are buried," I said. Literally and figuratively. Warren's face went pale as he flipped through the documents. These were things he thought had been destroyed years ago. Things that could send him to prison. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice tight. I leaned forward. "I want you to stop protecting Elias Quinn. Pull your support. Let justice happen." Warren shook his head. "If Elias goes down, he'll talk. He knows things about me, about deals we've done together." Smiled. "No, he doesn't. Elias never paid attention to the details. That was always my job." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of myself, the real Harper Quinn, blonde and smiling, standing next to Dad. Warren's Scotch glass hit the table with a crack. "You're dead," he whispered. I shook my head. "I'm very much alive. And if you continue backing the man who tried to murder me, I'll make sure every document in this folder ends up with the FBI. You'll go to prison right alongside him." Warren stared at me for a long time. Then slowly he nodded. "You're just like your father," he said. "Ruthless." I stood up. "My father never tried to drown his own daughter. Now pull your support. Today." Warren made the call that afternoon. I know because by evening, Elias's accounts were frozen. The anonymous bail money was withdrawn, triggering a review of his release. His lawyers suddenly became unavailable. His friends stopped returning calls. I watched it all happen from the shadows, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. 1 week later, federal agents arrested Elias again. This time there was no bail. The evidence was too strong, and his mysterious protector had vanished. Elias was held pending trial. I waited another month, watching him sit in jail, watching his empire crumble. Quinn Industries was put into receivership. The board was dissolved. Everything my father had built was being torn apart. But that was okay. I'd rebuild it. The right way this time. On a cold February night, exactly 13 months after Elias had pushed me into the ocean, I walked up to his mansion. It was dark and empty now, seized by the government. But I'd kept a key. I let myself in and waited. 3 hours later I heard a car in the driveway. Elias's lawyers had gotten him released for the night to retrieve personal items from the mansion, one last privilege before his trial started. I heard his footsteps in the foyer, heavy and tired. He walked into the living room and flicked on the lights. That's when he saw me. I was sitting in his favorite chair, the one that faced the infinity pool and the ocean beyond. The same ocean he'd thrown me into. Elias froze. Every drop of color drained from his face. His mouth opened but no sound came out. "Hello, Elias," I said calmly. "Miss me?" His legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees, staring at me like I was a ghost. Maybe I was, in a way. The Harper he'd killed had been trusting and naive. The Harper sitting before him now was something else entirely. "You're dead," he finally whispered. "I watched you go under." I shook my head. "You watched me fall. You didn't stay long enough to watch me drown. That was your first mistake." Elias tried to stand but couldn't. His hands shook. "This isn't possible. You can't be here." I pulled out my phone and pressed play. His own voice filled the room, clear and damning. "You should have stayed out of it, Harper." Then the sound of the splash. The yacht engines starting. The security footage I'd recovered showed everything. Elias's face on the screen, cold and calculated as he watched me drown. His face now, pale and terrified, matched perfectly. "That footage went to the FBI," I said quietly. "Along with documentation of every crime you've committed. The embezzlement, The falsified death certificate. The shell companies. The money laundering. All of it. Elias shook his head frantically. You can't prove anything. Have lawyers. I have friends. Warren Blackwood. I interrupted. He's not your friend anymore. I made sure of that. The hopelessness in Elias's eyes was almost satisfying. Almost. Why? He whispered. Why didn't you just come forward when you survived? Why wait all this time? I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the pool. The ocean glittered beyond, dark and endless. Because I wanted you to feel what I felt, I said. That night in the water, I felt everything slip away. My life, my future, everything I'd worked for. I wanted you to know that feeling. To watch everything you stole crumble in your hands. Behind me, I heard sirens approaching. The FBI had been alerted to Elias's presence at the mansion. My job here was done. You're going to prison, I told him, not turning around. For attempted murder. For fraud. For everything. And when you're sitting in that cell, I want you to remember something. You didn't just lose $3 billion and your freedom. You lost it all because you underestimated the one person who actually built what you tried to steal. The sirens got louder. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Elias was sobbing now, but I felt no pity. I walked toward the door, then paused. Goodbye, Elias. I hope drowning in your choices feels exactly like drowning in the ocean. The trial lasted 3 months. Elias was found guilty on every charge. Attempted murder, fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. The judge sentenced him to 40 years without parole. I sat in the courtroom gallery, wearing my disguise, and watched him led away in chains. He looked small and broken, nothing like the confident man who'd pushed me off that yacht. After the trial, I began rebuilding. Quinn Industries was restructured under a new name, Ascent Holdings. I put together a new board, hired people I trusted, and slowly brought the company back from the edge. Took 2 years of hard work, but we made it. Thomas retired from fishing and became my head of security. Marcus came out of retirement to be my CFO. We surrounded ourselves with people who valued loyalty over profit. On the 3rd anniversary of the night Elias tried to kill me, I drove to the coast. I stood on the same dock where Thomas had brought me ashore, alive but barely. The ocean stretched before me, gray and peaceful. Once it had been my grave. Now it was just water. It survived. It won. And I'd learned something important. Sometimes revenge isn't about making someone hurt. It's about proving you were always stronger than they thought. I turned away from the ocean and drove home, leaving the past where it belonged. Behind me, drowned and forgotten.